If I can now move on to the Right Honourable Caroline Nokes, who's the chair of the Women in Equalities Select Committee. It's wonderful to have you, Caroline. You've got such a wealth of experience, both as a local councillor. You first stood for Parliament in 2001 before being elected in May of 2010. So like many of our politicians, you've had a long apprenticeship. You are you've served on a very large number of select committees. You were chair of the Speaker's Advisory Committee on Works of Art. You've served as a PPS in the Department of Work and Pensions and the Department of Transport, and then as Minister for Welfare Delivery at DWP, Cabinet Office Minister for Government as Resilience and Efficiency, and then you were Minister of State for Immigration, a role for which you also attended Cabinet. So this is a huge amount of parliamentary experience in precisely the areas we're talking about. And you're now chair of the Women in Equalities Select Committee, which is, a wonderful parliamentary but also public position to have to push this agenda forward. So can I ask you, Caroline, to give us your thoughts?
Thank you, and that's a hell of an introduction, isn't it? And when you hear it listed like that, it sounds as if I've been around an awfully long time. I prefer to focus. It was a lot crammed into 10 years, and currently find myself as chair of the Women in Equalities Select Committee, a brilliant role, really important, and I think one that I only took up in February of this year, at a time when we didn't know what was coming over the hill with COVID, really unsure as to the global impact. And the committee, and I have a massive amount of respect for a committee that was drawn, with the exception of me and Angela Crawley from the SNP, from entirely new parliamentarians. So people who were elected in December 2019 were elected to the committee, because it is an election, in late February 2020, and I think we only had the opportunity to meet once in person in one room as a committee before COVID hit, and we were all sent off to all four corners of the country to try and learn how to scrutinise government ministers remotely via Zoom, without the ability, and I always say this, I'm really candid about this, without the ability to sit in a room and eyeball them directly. So a huge challenge for largely new parliamentarians. And I think we had one strategy session prior to COVID where we were discussing what the committee wanted to look at over the course of the coming 12 months. And there was a long list of issues and suggestions that were brought up. First and foremost, the gender pay gap, which of course, due to COVID, is now reporting on that is suspended. But we wanted to add to that the ethnicity pay gap, which I think is crucially important. We wanted to talk about the unfair access that disabled people have to transport and the impact that that has on their ability to access work. It is self-evident. If you cannot use public transport, then your work opportunities are going to be much more limited than your able-bodied counterparts. We wanted to talk about a range of issues around maternity and pregnancy. We wanted to talk about the Gender Recognition Act, and we were a bit pokey with the Secretary of State at DIT and the Minister for Women and Equalities, Liz Truss, around what was the delay. The consultation was 2 years ago. We knew the government had the responses. Why had they not responded to the consultation? When was that coming? And when she appeared in front of the committee by Zoom, we said to her, when are we going to see your response? And she said, before the summer. When she appeared in the House immediately before the summer, she said the responses were coming over the summer. We got to September, the response still hadn't arrived, although we have now seen it, albeit perhaps not in the detail that I would expect as a select committee chair. And we wanted to talk about issues like discrimination in sport. And then COVID arrived. And our ability to scrutinise was reduced. We are now fighting with other select committees for broadcast slots, for access to rooms in which you can safely have hybrid proceedings. We have some committee members who have still not been able to be present, and I take give absolute credit to my colleague Angela Crawley, who's vice chair of the committee, who does all of her scrutiny from Scotland, and she does it brilliantly remotely, but we have a sort of a little rota of who can be in the room at any one time. And when you're putting a minister on the spot, you want to have them in the room. And I'm now very keen that if we have a minister come in front of the committee, then they have to sit in the room with us, and we have to make sure that there's no spat behind the Zoom camera holding up the answers on a little check board, because I'm sure that does happen. In fact, I'm sure that has happened. So we found ourselves looking at COVID through the prism of equalities and deciding where we wanted our inquiry to go. And it was very obvious. I remember that first day in Parliament when we were debating the emergency legislation around COVID. And I raised a range of issues, and it was about people in insecure employment. And we knew that predominantly you would find young people in insecure employment, you would find people from Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds, and you would find women in insecure employment. So there was instantly a concern around the economic impact of COVID and how that would affect people with protected characteristics. Secondly, we were concerned about the impact it would have on disabled people and their access to care. And we could see through the easements to the Care Act that local authorities would no longer have a duty to provide care, but they would have a power. Now, that's a very clear distinction, and it meant quite practically, and I make no criticism of this, that local authorities would be able to prioritise caregiving during the pandemic. And we can all understand that if there was a squeeze on those working in the social care sector, maybe many of them would go down with the virus, that their time would have to be spent with those who were in the most need. Now, fortunately, we have seen very little use of those easements. I think it is only 8 councils to date have actually used the easements. But what we have not had is adequate data around the criteria that they used, why they used them, how often that they were used. We also saw changes to the Mental Health Act, which for me were, I could see the importance of doing them, but deeply worrying. So it meant that only 1 doctor instead of 2 was needed to section somebody under the Mental Health Act, and that people could be detained for longer than previously under the Mental Health Act. Now, I was really pleased when we came to review the emergency legislation, and I think that was just 2 weeks ago, that the Department for Health and Social Care made 2 amendments. One, an automatic agreement to review the Care Act easements, and I was very pleased to see them make that change. And secondly, doing away with the changes to the Mental Health Act, which had not been used. And I was very pleased to hear that they had not been used. But I thought when it comes to parliamentary scrutiny, that whole renewal of the Coronavirus Act posed some really difficult questions for Parliament and for government. So first and foremost, we were extended the courtesy of a mere 90 minutes debate for that. Now, I like to believe that as the chair of a select committee, I have a reasonable amount of standing in Parliament. My committee had rushed out a report on disabled people and COVID ahead of that debate on the renewal of the Care Act easements. And there was only 90 minutes for debate. I think I was the 23rd person on the call list to debate it, and we got as far as about number 12. So despite my committee having produced a report specifically for that debate, despite the fact that I am a select committee chair who had been scrutinising the very piece of legislation that we were debating in Parliament that day, I didn't get a chance to contribute. So a huge frustration around that. Now, we launched our inquiry into the impact of COVID on BAME people, on women and on disabled people way back in March. And it very quickly became clear that this could not be one large piece of work, that this was going to be split into those 3 strands. And at the time of launching, I think we had no comprehension of the impact COVID would have physically on the physical well-being of Black, Asian, minority ethnic people. We suspected it would have an impact on their employment, but we didn't know that we would see that, that horrendous death toll so starkly identified in the media when you saw the pictures of the healthcare workers who had died from COVID. And the government launched the PHE review, which was an important piece of work, but there was a massive amount of frustration that that review did not come up with any recommendations. The first review didn't have any recommendations at all, and that caused an enormous amount of anger, distress, and from my perspective, real concern that you could have a review that, in the words of Tony, and I absolutely commend him for saying this in his earlier presentation, that it was how and not why. And so we all could see how. We could see that BAME people were being disproportionately affected, but we weren't understanding why. And from my perspective, just as important as why is the what. What are you going to do about it? And Tony and I are going to have a very interesting panel discussion and answer all of your questions later on. And I think there might be some challenge between him and I, because Tony certainly, as part of the new commission that the Prime Minister set up, clearly does not want to rush out the what. He wants it to be evidence-based, and that is absolutely right. But there is certainly a great deal of impatience around what's actually going to happen. When will we see some tangibles come out of this? And I was once told by a PA who worked for me probably 15 years ago now, when I said that I was getting a little bit impatient, she said to me, because we'd always describe that as your strong suit, wouldn't we? And I sort of looked and said, me, impatient? Oh, I don't think so. I think I'm perfectly patient. I have now done some introspection, and 15 years on, I accept I am a very, very impatient woman. So just a few more thoughts to wrap around this. And I was absolutely fascinated to hear about Tony's work about identifying talent and turning that into genius and giving it the opportunities that it needs. He's absolutely right. We have to do that for all young people. And I always say it is not good enough for our young people to leave school with a clutch of good GCSEs. We also need to have given them a passion for something, aspiration, a path to follow in later life. Now, Tony and I will probably fall out hugely about too many white working class girls headed towards the beauty sector, because I've done a great deal of work in Parliament over the course of the last 14 weeks or so around that very sector. And I always say that what particularly young women, and it is a sector that is very heavily dominated by women, 90% plus working in the beauty sector, that these are people who go off and train. They then work for a salon. They discover that actually if they were self-employed, they would earn a great deal more than working for somebody else. So after a few years, they tend to set up on their own and they become entrepreneurs and they employ other people. And I always say they are absolutely ruthless in their ability to promote their businesses, their ability to retain their clients and harvest the data about who requires what treatment and when. And they are absolutely brilliant, self-starting, self-made women. And I want to see more of them. Now, I think Tony's right when he says that they could very probably go on in any field and have passed A-level chemistry and go on to be the STEM entrepreneurs of the future. But the reality is that this is a huge sector of women who I have an enormous amount of respect and admiration for. But we need to find genius in a whole range of sectors across the entire education field and across the entire economy. Tony is dead right when he says that we can't just be looking to the playing fields of Eton and Harrow for our geniuses of the future, for our leaders of the future. You need to have a wide range of diverse voices. You need to have a wide range of experiences. And I think that is absolutely where the government is trying to go with the GEO and the Government Equalities Office. They will always have people like me peering over their shoulder, making sure that they're doing what we as parliamentarians both want and need them to be doing. But I think when I look at Tony's commission, this is absolutely a step forward. I was in the Cabinet Office when Theresa May published the race disparity audit and set up the race disparity unit. It's critical that we have the data. It's critical that we understand the pathways and where things are working and indeed where they are not. But it is, as I always tell people, the absolute duty of both a backbench member of Parliament and a select committee chair and member to make sure that we are holding those ministers to account and making sure that there is delivery on the objectives and the policies that they set for themselves. Now, I think I've probably spoken for long enough. I'm really looking forward to the Q&A session. And I just wanted to say what a huge opportunity it was to be here and talk a little bit about the work the committee has been focused on over the course of the summer.